General Qamar Javed Bajwa had a meeting with something like 25-30 Pakistani journalists where it was an off-the-record meeting, but he told them that the Pakistan army was not in a position to wage war against India, and that is why this outrage has been seen inside Pakistan. But what Bajwa was telling them was to wake up, smell the coffee, to understand that war was not a realistic option. India certainly enjoys an overwhelming advantage over Pakistan, but I don't think that advantage is so big that Pakistan will simply fold over. Recently, there was an interview in which two Pakistani journalists were having a conversation and a very sensational disclosure was made. And the disclosure was sensational, but it wasn't surprising really. Apparently, way back in 2021, the then Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa had a meeting with something like 25-30 Pakistani journalists where it was an off-the-record meeting, but he told them that the Pakistan army was not in a position to wage war against India, that it had huge equipment problems, that its tanks were not exactly functional, that it did not have the required amount of aircraft, or even the fact that the aircraft were not entirely airworthy. There were huge logistics problems, and according to these disclosures, the Pakistan army simply did not have the fuel to fight the war, a possible war with India. Now, the whole idea behind this entire disclosure was because the journalists who were discussing this are known purveyors of conspiracy theories and hurling scurrilous allegations, but they used this particular briefing of the then army chief to accuse him of selling out on Kashmir. They even went to the extent of alleging that he had an idea of what constitutional reforms were being planned in Kashmir in 2019, and that when the then Prime Minister, so-called Prime Minister of Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, protested and wanted that the Pakistan army should declare war on India because of these constitutional reforms. The army chief of Pakistan told him that war was simply not an option between India and Pakistan. Pakistan could not afford it. Apparently, in 2021, the army chief also told a bunch of retired and serving diplomats that they needed to make peace with India because war was an unaffordable option for Pakistan. Now, clearly this created a huge furor in Pakistan. From one point of view, it is quite remarkable that the Pakistan media kept this sensational disclosure under the wraps, and in some cases I would say that this was the biggest story of the decade, but they kept this under the wraps for almost 2 years before it was recently disclosed. How do you keep something which has been told to almost 30 journalists quiet for 2 years? I think kudos to the Pakistan media managers, the Pakistan Army's media managers. But I think what is important is the furor which later emerged and all kinds of cries, especially from Pakistan, that General Bajwa was talking utter nonsense. Just a couple of days back, we've had the Pakistan Army spokesperson coming out and saying that the Pakistan Army is always ready for war. Not only is it ready for war, it will take the war into the enemy's territory. The usual Punjabi bluff and bluster which the Pakistan Army indulges in. was indulged in by the ISPR spokesperson. But I think I would not expect the army spokesperson or any army general for that matter to say anything different in public. I think what is important is what is said in private. Now, of course, the ISPR chief says that whatever was said in private meetings between Bajwa and the journalists, Pakistani journalists, was quoted out of context. Frankly, this is the typical nonsense which is dished out by official spokespersons when they really don't have an answer to what has been said, and they just want to brush it under the carpet. But I think what was said in a private meeting in front of 25-30 journalists is far more important and probably far more realistic than what is said publicly. And it's not surprising that General Bajwa said what he said. If you go back in time, at the time when India initiated the constitutional reforms in Jammu and Kashmir, it could have been construed to be a very provocative act on Pakistan's part, and Pakistan could have tried to justify adventurism against India. But if you look at the statement which was issued by the Pakistan Army just a day after the reforms were unveiled, it was a very, very sober kind of a press release, where the Pakistan Army said that we really don't take this move on India's part very seriously, and they tried to downplay it. They tried to douse the fires that many people in Pakistan were trying to light. But the Pakistan Army was not, biting the bait which was being thrown at them by the Pakistani media. Now, part of the problem for the Pakistan Army has always been that over the years, over the decades really, it has cultivated this larger than life image about itself. In fact, there is a book by a former spokesperson of the ISPR which is titled The Image and Reality of the Pakistan Army. But I think what is important is that this larger than life image, this all conquering army, they pretend that they are the world's #1 army, that no other army stands up to them. The only wars actually Pakistan Army has won are the wars it has fought against its own people. It has conquered Balochistan time and time again. It has conquered Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It has conquered the Sindhis and the Mohajirs. It has browbeaten people. It has done all kinds of things, but it has never really won any war. It has fought dirty wars against India and not really gotten anywhere. It has fought dirty wars in Afghanistan and is paying the price for it. But really, in terms of accomplishments of the Pakistan Army, there's virtually nothing they can show for it. But the image has always been there that this is this great Napoleonic army which will sweep through whichever territory it wants to attack. The reality, of course, is very different. But I think what really hurt many Pakistanis was that this particular army, and about the Pakistan Army, it is said that it is an army with a state. Pakistan is not a state with an army, but Pakistan Army is an army with a state. And that this army is now telling us that it is incapable of fighting a war. I think that's a bit of a misunderstanding of what exactly Bajwa was trying to tell the Pakistanis. I think, to my mind, the message he was trying to deliver was that while the Pakistan Army is probably well equipped to defend itself against any Indian hostile action, the Pakistan Army is simply not in a position to initiate a war, to indulge in any kind of adventurism, and certainly not any kind of adventurism which can be prolonged, which is more than a skirmish, and it's a kind of a long drawn out conflict, because wars are not fought on empty treasuries. And from around 2018, it was very clear that Pakistan was heading towards bankruptcy. In 2018, when Imran Khan came into power At that point of time, the Pakistanis, within days of Imran Khan coming into power, it was clear that they needed to go to the IMF for a bailout package. That bailout package only came sometime in the middle of 2019. Events in Kashmir had happened in February 2019. The skirmish had happened between India and Pakistan, and then Pakistan went into the IMF program, and by 2021, Pakistan's economy was in a very, very bad shape. I think what Bajwa was trying to inject was a dose of realism in the Pakistani media. Now, of course, I think it speaks volumes of the indoctrination and the brainwashing of the zombies who are part of the Pakistani media, that they simply are not able to accept reality when it's told to them by none other than the Pakistan Army Chief. And that is why this outrage has been seen inside Pakistan. But what Bajwa was telling them was to wake up, smell the coffee, to understand that war was not a realistic option, that Pakistan needed to have some kind of a strategic pause as far as its hostility with India was concerned. Also remember that the economy was tanking, politically Pakistan was in trouble, strategically if you look at it, Afghanistan was in a flux. Nobody really knew how Afghanistan will play out, and as Afghanistan has played out post the Taliban takeover, it is very clear that it's become a millstone around Pakistan's neck. All their strategic grand designs which were linked to Afghanistan have come a cropper. Afghanistan is today the biggest source of instability as far as Pakistan is concerned. And if at this stage Pakistan was not only engaged in warding off the terrorism which is coming from Afghanistan, but was also engaged in open conflict with India, even if it was only at the line of control, it would be caught in a kind of a double bind. It would be caught in a pincer, which is the worst nightmare for any army. India too was trying to avoid a pincer at that point of time. We have a continuing situation with China along the LAC on the east and the north in Kashmir, and we have, if we have a open front with Pakistan on the LOC, then we are also being caught in a pincer. So the ceasefire agreement of 2021 worked for both sides. It was part of a choreography which would lead to some relaxation of trade, and then if Pakistani accounts are to be believed, there was also a visit by Prime Minister Modi to Pakistan around April of 2021, which would then set the ball rolling. But of course, none of it happened, because the next step of the choreographed movements, which was to reopen trade, was agreed to by Commerce Minister Imran Khan, but then was rejected by Prime Minister Imran Khan, and then it was all history after that. But nevertheless, the ceasefire has held, and the only reason why that ceasefire has held is because it is in the mutual interest of both India and Pakistan. Both sides have used the ceasefire and the space created by it for their own purposes, and which is fair enough. This is what diplomacy and this is what conflict is all about. You use the space available to maximize your own advantage, even if your adversary or your enemy also gets some advantage out of it, which is par for the course. But I think what is important is that as we go forward, I think it is important for India also to understand that if Pakistan is not in a position to initiate war or to start a war with India, then neither is India in a position to do that with Pakistan. India certainly enjoys an overwhelming advantage over Pakistan, but I don't think that advantage is so big that Pakistan will simply fold over. I think from the Pakistani side, the signal which has come, whether it stays or not is a different matter, because there have been instances in the past where the Pakistanis have indulged in adventurism, Kargil being a prime example, even though they had an empty treasury. But maybe they've learned something from what happened in Kargil, the diplomatic debacle that it was, the military disaster that it was, and maybe they will desist from repeating something like that. From an Indian point of view, it is extremely important to understand that at a time when we are literally on the takeoff stage economically, do we want to be distracted by a war with Pakistan? Do we really think that it will be worth it? A war is an horrendously expensive business. Do we really think that is the way to go forward? I don't think anybody in the government of India believes that. That is the first thing. The second is that while Pakistan might not be in a position to initiate a war, Pakistan is certainly in a position to defend itself if a war is imposed on Pakistan. And there is a big difference between launching offensive operations and trying to defend yourself. It is in some ways easier if you're defending yourself. It is less expensive if you're defending yourself than if you're initiating a war. So I think we need to be mindful of that. Number three, I think we still have some distance to tread before we can increase the gap between us and Pakistan to a point where we can even think of carrying out actual operations against Pakistan, whether it is limited or something more than limited. And I think that needs to be understood. But most importantly, I think it is also a lesson for us that in the event that we want to initiate certain cross-border actions against Pakistan of the sorts we did after Pulwama suicide bombing by Pakistani terrorists, in case we want to carry out certain hostile operations, we need to work out in advance the escalation ladder. I think what happened at Pulwama was that we certainly delivered a message by attacking terrorist camps in Balakot. But somewhere along the line, that message got diluted because there was a reaction from the Pakistani side. And as a result of that reaction, we never responded. We never went up the escalation ladder. Perhaps we didn't go up the escalation ladder because we thought it could lead to an endless spiral. But if what General Bajwa has now disclosed is anything to go by, I think Pakistan could not have afforded to go up the escalation ladder beyond maybe a couple of steps. So I think it is important for the Indian planners to work out, to game what the various possibilities are as we go forward, because I don't think terrorism from Pakistan is going to come to an end. There might be a strategic pause. There might even be some kind of overtures to have some modus vivendi worked out on how to normalize relations. But really, it is not something which is going to be sustainable for any length of time. What the Pakistanis want at this point in time is breathing space. Their economy is in trouble, their politics is in trouble, the security situation is in trouble. They need to come out of it. If they get a pause of 10, 15, 20 years, they rejuvenate, they re-energize themselves, they regain their strength, they'll come back into the fray against India. So I don't think any deal or any understanding that we have with Pakistan is going to lead to peace for all times. It's probably only going to be a temporary peace, and we should be mindful of that, because we have this tendency in India to take our eye off the ball, to imagine that the world is a utopia and then let down our guard and then be rudely surprised. So I think whatever revelations have come out of Pakistan are very instructive, not just for policy planners but also for defense planners in India, and we should take the right lessons from what has come from Pakistan.